When we talk about high-speed stealth aircraft, what might come to mind is the F-35 fighter jet. But in 2004, the most timely answer would have been the RAH-66 Comanche. This sleek-looking helicopter spent 22 years in development and consumed over $7 billion before being abruptly canceled with only 2 flying prototypes to show for it. But why was this expensive military program canceled before it could make significant headway? Stay tuned as we go over the story of the RAH-66 Comanche, what most would describe as the F-35 of helicopters. The story of Comanche. The Comanche sprang from the Army's light helicopter experimental program in the 1980s. At that time, the Soviet Union was a palpable threat to the security and interest of the United States, despite the country's being only a decade from ruin. When the Soviet Union was believed to still be funneling a great deal of money into their advanced military projects, the US Army set to work on finding viable replacements for their fleets of Vietnam-era light attack and reconnaissance helicopters through its forward-looking LHX program. The program's intended aim was fairly simple, despite the complexity of the effort, to field a single rotorcraft that could replace the OH-6Ku Scout and the OH-58 Kiowa helicopters, which were delivered from the civilian Bell 2006 Jet Ranger and Hughes 500 choppers. Scout helicopters were primarily tasked with spying out enemy positions and designating them for attack by friendly forces. However, they were also suitable for attacking lightly defended targets with rocket pods, miniguns, and even tank-busting TOWs or Hellfire missiles, while armored Apache gunships tackled the fire from heavier foes. Still, the Army wanted a more survivable scout helicopter to combat the Soviet Union's Hughes mechanized armies that were well protected by self-propelled, short-range, anti-aircraft missiles and rapid-firing flat cannons. After 6 years since the introduction of this program, the Army finally issued a formal request for proposals, or RFP, to various manufacturers. In October 1988, the Army announced 2 teams, Boeing-Sikorsky and Bell McDonnell Douglas, had received contracts to further develop their concepts, and in 1991, the futuristic design proposed by the Boeing-Sikorsky team was selected. Per Army custom, the RAH-66 reconnaissance attack helicopter was formally named after the Comanche Native American tribe. The Pentagon allocated $2.8 billion to this group to begin production of their choppers, part of which was eventually planned to fund the actual manufacture of 6 prototype helicopters at the Sikorsky factory in Bridgeport, Connecticut. That same year saw the dissolution of the Soviet Union, along with the rationale and budget for building many expensive and non-essential US weapon systems, such as the Sea-Wolf-class submarine. Nonetheless, Boeing and Sikorsky proceeded with the development of 2 prototypes shaped with non-radar reflective surfaces made out of radar-absorbing composite materials. This supposedly gave the Comanche 1/250% of the radar cross-selections of an OH-58, allowing it to approach 4 times closer to an enemy before being detected. The stealth helicopter also managed engine exhaust by funneling it through its shrouded tail section for cooling by the shrouded tail fan, using infrared dampening paint to reduce the Scout chopper's heat signature to further limit detection to 1/4 of normal. Its specially designed rotor blades were canted downward to reduce the amount of noise the helicopter made in flight by half. The Comanche was further shielded with radar warning systems, self-defense jammers, chaff and flare dispensers, electronic warfare systems, and enough Kevlar and graphite armor plating to withstand heavy machine gun rounds and 23mm shells that would help keep the RAH-66 crew safe should they be detected. Except for stealth technology, Comanche was exceptional in other aspects too. Because of its small and light design, the helicopter was able to perform tight turns and loop-de-loops in the air. The RAH-66 fuselage was only 43 feet, or 13 meters long, and the most important reason behind its compact design is its ability to fit into transport ships. With a dash speed of 201 miles per hour and a cruising speed of 190 miles per hour, the Comanche was far from the fastest military helicopter, but it still did well in the air. The US Army wanted a versatile helicopter that could be deployed everywhere needed. Due to its fuel capacity, the Comanche was able to fly close to 1,000 nautical miles before needing to refuel. The chopper's triple redundant fly-by-wire flight control kept it stable even when undertaking tight maneuvers. Considering this, it could fly without being transported to a flashpoint if needed. Due to its modern detection and navigation systems, the Comanche was also capable of operating at night and in unconventional weather circumstances. Although the main role of the helicopter was to scan targets without getting noticed so the rest of the fleet could attack, the RAH-66 was able to perform a light attack with the chin-mounted 20mm 3-barrel XM301 cannon. The helicopter could also carry 6 AGM-11 Hellfire air-to-ground missiles or 12 AIM-92 Stinger air-to-air missiles at its maximum capacity. However, the missile capacity could be increased to 8 more Hellfire or 16 Stinger missiles. The expansion could only be achieved using the exterior, so obviously, that wouldn't help maintain its stealth profile. And so the expansion using wing stubs is only a resort in situations where firepower takes precedence over stealth. The RAH-66 used a long-range forward-looking infrared sensor to spot enemies, which it could then take out with a laser target. A millimeter-wave longbow radar could be optionally mounted atop the rotor, allowing the crew to peek over concealing hill-crested trees. Sensor data could then be relayed to friendly forces via high-speed data links. In January 1996, a prototype of the RAH-66 finally made its first flight, and a second prototype joined it 3 years later. But as we later saw with the F-35, the Comanche incorporated so many brand new technologies that developing, debugging, and integrating them nearly tripled the development cost over time. For instance, the first helicopter came to be hundreds of pounds heavier than expected, resulting in post-facto weight trimming and efforts to develop more powerful T-800 turboshaft engines. The sensors on the RAH-66 proved buggy. Its sensors were initially unreliable, and its radar-absorbent materials were susceptible to erosion when exposed to rain. While these issues were being discovered, the military benchmarks crept continuously upwards, requiring, for example, light scout choppers to somehow be able to carry enough fuel for transoceanic ferry flights. By 2002, many cost overruns and delays later, the Comanche was beginning to look more like a pile of problems than solutions, earning it many bureaucratic foes, and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq soon diverted spending to more pressing operational contingencies, resulting in the Army reducing their order for Comanches by nearly half. And finally, in 2004, the production of the Comanche was abruptly canceled after over $7 billion had been spent, including a $500 million cancellation penalty. The 2 surviving prototypes are now displayed at the Army's Aviation Museum in Rucker, Alabama. The issue could have been resolved had the Pentagon given the team more time and money, resulting in a decent scout helicopter. But the US Army was already getting tired of waiting for the Comanche to live up to its hype, and the 22-year-old program was simply no longer relevant enough to justify its financial excesses. For one thing, a high and fast-flying jet plane stealth is much more expected than a helicopter flying at a fraction of the speed and altitude. While the stealth properties of the Comanche were certainly useful, the helicopter would have remained vulnerable to all manner of short-range anti-aircraft weapons and likely heat-seeking missiles. Indeed, if the Army had continued the program, it would have necessitated additional expenditures for upgrades in order to withstand the most recent SAM systems. Furthermore, unlike the F-35, the Comanche was fulfilling a relatively niche role in the Pentagon's war machine. The procurement of the RAH-66 would have consumed more than 40% of the Army's budget, even though transport and attack helicopters were higher priorities. As Lieutenant Colonel Dan Ward put it in a Peace and Time magazine, the Comanche was unaffordable, unnecessary, and despite more than 2 decades of effort, incomplete. The Comanche and 5 other Army programs sucked $30 billion in cost without producing any operational systems, but that does not mean the program was a complete loss. Among Defense Department insiders, the RAH-66 Comanche program is still seen in a fairly positive light. The technologies in the Comanche were believed to have been integrated into the special MH-60 Black Hawk stealth helicopters used to perform secret commando missions, including the Navy SEAL raid that killed Osama bin Laden. The Comanche, in theory, might have been an awesome helicopter, but fell through because of a poorly managed defense program. Any attempts at stealth technology in helicopters, like the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft program, slated to begin production in 2028, should take lessons from the Comanche and avoid such poor management practices as accounted for the failure of that program. Join the conversation in the comments and share your thoughts on what you think about the RAH-66 Comanche helicopter and the potential of the FARA program, its apparent successor.